Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
During the 10 years they were married, Nathan firmly believed that love was something you built. A project made of patience, effort, and daily choices. He never expected everything to be perfect all the time. There were disagreements, of course, like in any relationship, but he believed that getting through these phases was exactly what made a couple stronger. He gave himself to the relationship as naturally as breathing. Loving Rachel was part of his routine, his instinct, and he did it without expecting recognition. His commitment was quiet, constant. Every morning, he woke up before she did to make coffee. Not out of obligation, but because he enjoyed starting the day by seeing her face when she received that cup. Sometimes she didn't even say thank you, and he didn't mind. For Nathan, love was made of gestures like that, simple, almost invisible, but full of intention. In his eyes, Rachel was everything he had ever wanted in a partner: intelligent, reserved, with a sweet way of speaking and that calm smile that seemed capable of silencing any storm. He idealized Rachel based on every little gesture, and that ideal started guiding his decisions. He gave up parts of himself without a second thought. He turned down promotions at work that required long trips because he wanted to be present. He avoided going out at night with his friends and preferred having dinner at home with Rachel. He learned to cook the meals she liked, even though he didn't really enjoy cooking. He planned trips to please her, researched every detail, and was content just to see her eyes light up when something turned out well. The love he gave was so deep that sometimes he forgot to ask himself if he was receiving the same in return. From the outside, the couple seemed stable. No big scandals, no constant fights. But for Rachel, that stability gradually turned into predictability. And predictability, in the end, turned into boredom. Yet Nathan didn't notice. He was too busy being the husband he believed she wanted. Their conversations dwindled over time, but he thought it was just the natural pace of married life. Physical affection became rarer, and he thought it was just job stress. The silences grew, and he took them to mean comfort, the kind of mature silence where just having the other person there was enough. He never once considered the possibility that he was loving alone. It never crossed his mind that Rachel was drifting away emotionally. After all, she was still there, sharing the same bed, going to social events together, making daily decisions together. Her absence was too subtle for him to interpret it as a warning sign. And deep down, Nathan kept believing that what they had was strong enough to last a lifetime. Rachel, on the other hand, never openly complained. But she also didn't show any enthusiasm for Nathan's efforts. When he arranged special dinners, she said she was tired. When he gave her flowers, she'd offer a quick smile and leave the bouquet on the table without much comment. Even so, he kept trying. He believed it was just a phase, and that phases pass. For years, Nathan carried alone the love he believed was shared. And the cruelest part of it all was that he never realized how much of himself he was giving up. He was so focused on keeping the relationship alive that he forgot to look inside and ask himself if he was still happy. If he still recognized himself in that man who acted more out of habit than desire, who smiled beside someone who was slowly becoming a stranger. In his view, they were just facing the usual challenges of married life. And he put up with everything because he believed real love demanded sacrifice. But while he sacrificed time, dreams, and even his own identity, Rachel was silently distancing herself. And all of that would remain hidden, like a crack behind a wall, until the day something, or someone, brought into the open what he refused to see. That night, Nathan decided to come home early. He had spent the whole day thinking about Rachel, about how things had seemed a bit distant between them over the last few weeks. He decided on a simple surprise. He bought a bottle of her favorite wine and a slice of apple pie, which they used to share during calmer moments in the past. It wasn't a special occasion, but he felt like maybe an unexpected gesture could rekindle what had grown lukewarm. As he parked, he felt a slight tightness in his chest, as though something was off, but he brushed it aside. He opened the door slowly, trying not to make noise. He was already preparing himself to find her on the couch, maybe reading or watching something on TV. But the house was silent. The only sound came from the end of the hallway. A low voice, spaced words. Rachel was on the phone. He smiled, thinking he could wait until she finished the call before he made a thoughtful entrance with the wine and dessert. He moved forward quietly. Her voice grew clearer with each step. At first, it sounded like a trivial conversation, until his own name popped up in the middle of her sentences. He stopped. His body reacted before his mind did. He stood completely still, listening. She was saying things he never imagined he'd hear come from the mouth of the woman he loved. She called him suffocating. Predictable. She said she felt stifled by him, like she was in a prison of routine, stuck in a life that made no sense anymore. Nathan felt his body turn cold. An odd feeling spread through his chest, as if the air around him had gotten heavier. He couldn't quite tell what hurt more, what she was actually saying or the way she said it, with a light, almost mocking tone. She was venting to someone, maybe a friend, maybe someone closer than he realized, but the only thing that mattered then was that she seemed relieved to say it all out loud. Like she'd been holding it in for a long time and was now letting everything out with a cruel sense of freedom. He stayed there, not knowing whether to back away or step forward. His heart pounded fast and off rhythm. He was still holding the wine, his hand trembling now, and it felt ridiculous compared to what he'd just heard. The sweet gesture he'd planned for that night seemed pointless compared to the realization that, for years, he had loved someone who no longer looked at him with the same sparkle in her eyes. This wasn't just a typical fight or a passing complaint. It went deeper than that. It was rejection disguised as silence. A buildup of unspoken feelings suddenly being laid out in a raw, definitive way. He turned around without a sound and headed upstairs. His hands shook as he opened the closet. He grabbed the first suitcase he could find and started tossing clothes inside, not caring about order, not thinking about what he was packing. It was pure instinct. He needed to get out. He needed distance from this reality that had seemed so solid until now, and from the abyss unfolding before his eyes. Every hastily folded item felt like an answer to the question ringing in his head: how could she do this? On his way back down the hallway, he heard her laugh. It wasn't loud or boisterous. It was a light, genuine laugh. She sounded relieved, maybe even happy. It struck him harder than any words could. It was as if his pain didn't exist to her. As if he had never mattered. As if all their years of dinners, conversations, and plans were just forgotten chapters in a story told by only one of them. He took a deep breath, turned the knob of the living room door, and walked in. Rachel was still on the phone, startled when she saw him there with the suitcase. The carefree look in her eyes suddenly turned to confusion. He didn't say a word. He looked at her for a few seconds, as if he wanted to memorize that face one last time. Then he left. The door closed softly, almost elegantly. But inside Nathan, the noise was deafening. He didn't look back. He walked to the car with determined steps. He threw the suitcase into the back seat, buckled himself in hastily, still shaking at the wheel. His world had just changed, and nothing made sense anymore. He didn't cry. He was too stunned to do that. He turned the key and drove off. Thoughts and images spun in his mind. He still couldn't fully grasp what was happening, but one thing grew clear inside him: the life he had known ended right then and there, with that phone call. He couldn't imagine what would come next. Nathan drove aimlessly for a few minutes. His chest felt tight, and his heart was pounding irregularly. The image of her laughing on the phone, so casual, wouldn't leave his mind. The car felt too small to contain everything he was feeling in that moment. He thought about just driving straight on, crossing the city, disappearing for a few days, going anywhere he could be far from her. But his body was exhausted, his head was spinning, and the heavy suitcase in the back seat reminded him he needed shelter. A place to breathe. He turned onto a side street and parked in front of a simple hotel near his office building. A regular place, without charm or memories. And in that moment, that was all he needed. He asked for a room for one night, maybe two. The front desk clerk asked a few questions, but he answered on autopilot, in a low voice, distant. Once in the room, he dropped the suitcase on a chair, took off his shoes, and stood there, still caught between the home he'd just left and this strange new place that was now his refuge. He looked at his phone and saw calls from Rachel. More than one. Messages were starting to come in. He took a deep breath and set the phone aside. His mind couldn't process anything else. He needed silence, distance, time. Meanwhile, back at the house, Rachel sat on the living room couch, phone still in hand. It took her a few seconds to grasp what had just happened. He had walked right past her, carrying a suitcase, and simply left. It was like a stranger had crossed the room, someone she didn't recognize. She tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Anxiety built up inside her. What was going on with him? Why such a sudden reaction? She wasn't used to seeing him like this. Nathan was always calm, rational, someone who preferred to talk things out before making any decisions. His silence now hurt more than any argument would. She got up from the couch and walked around the house, looking for any sign of what might have caused him to leave so abruptly. She went to the bedroom and saw the empty space in the closet, doors left ajar, clothes missing from the drawers. The suitcase was definitely gone. He had left with intent. None of this felt like an impulsive move. Rachel went back to the living room, picked up her phone, and typed another message. She asked if he was okay, begged him to call, said she wanted to understand. Still silence. She paced back and forth, trying to make sense of his behavior, until her eyes landed on the coffee table. She froze. Sitting there was a bottle of red wine and a still-sealed box of apple pie. Her heart started pounding. She took 2 slow steps toward the table, looking at those objects as if they were out of place in time. They hadn't been there before. He had come home, brought them with him. A gift. A gesture. A surprise. Rachel closed her eyes and backed away a bit, as though trying to avoid the conclusion that was forming in her mind. She was still holding her phone, but she wasn't trying to call anymore. The weight of that discovery pushed her down onto the couch. She sat slowly, staring at the wine and the pie with an expression that mixed shock and guilt. He heard her. Rachel brought her hand to her mouth, eyes wide, mind returning to the conversation she'd had minutes earlier. Every word she'd said about him now echoed in her head like a harsh verdict. Nathan had heard it all. He was there when she spoke about him that way. He was right there. And he left without saying a word because there was no need to say anything. She stayed there, sitting, looking at those objects as though they were accusing her. And in a way, that's exactly what they were doing. Nathan woke up before his alarm went off. He spent long minutes staring at the hotel room ceiling, as though waiting for some answer to appear there. His night had been interrupted by thoughts mixing past and future, but the present was what really hurt. He picked up his phone, dialed his boss's number, and quietly asked for a few days off. He didn't give any details, just said he needed time. The direct tone, unusual for him, was enough to be respected. When he hung up, he felt a small relief. For now, he didn't have to deal with deadlines, meetings, or demands. He threw on any clothes he could find and left the hotel without a specific plan. He thought about moving to another city. Maybe starting over in another state. He no longer felt like he belonged in the place where everything had happened. His memories, one by one, were now tinged with bitterness. Everything that once felt like home now hurt. He walked around the nearby streets until he saw a cafe next to the building where he worked. He knew the place, but rarely went in. He walked inside and chose a table by the window. He ordered a black coffee. The waiter set it down quietly, respecting that lost look that said so much. Meanwhile, Rachel had run out of ways to reach him. She spent the entire morning pacing, eyes on her phone, waiting for a response that never came. With each passing minute, her guilt grew. She decided she had to do something. She wanted to see him, needed to look him in the eye and say everything her pride had kept inside for too long. She grabbed her car keys and drove to his office. She walked quickly through the reception area and asked if Nathan had shown up that morning. The receptionist checked the system and kindly replied, he called in early to take a few days off. He's away for now. Rachel thanked her, surprised. She'd imagined he'd be there, carrying on as if nothing had happened. But no. He was gone, too. And that information hit her harder than she cared to admit. Leaving the building, she walked slowly, her eyes scanning the street. Then, almost by reflex, she looked toward the cafe next door. She spotted his silhouette through the window. He was sitting by himself, staring into his cup as if he were trying to find some logic there. She crossed the street with her heart pounding, pushed the door open, and went to his table. Nathan sensed her coming before he saw her. The reflection in the glass gave her away. When she sat down, he didn't say a word. He just watched her closely. Rachel took a deep breath. She said she needed to apologize, that replaying that night in her head made her see how unfair she'd been. She said she'd spent hours thinking about everything, and the more she thought, the more she realized how much she'd lost control of what actually mattered. He stayed quiet. His eyes locked on hers, not angry, but resolute. Then he spoke. Just one sentence, tell me the truth. Rachel bit her lip and hesitated. She said that if she told him everything, he might never want to see her again. She was scared. She thought maybe it was already too late. But she still had to tell him, because when he walked out the door, something in her broke. She felt an emptiness so huge she could hardly breathe. And in that emptiness, she could clearly see how little she had valued what she had. She said she wanted to try again, that she still believed in them, but she couldn't do that without being honest. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then, barely above a whisper, said, I'm going to tell you everything. Nathan remained silent, waiting. She took one more deep breath, her hands clutching the fabric of her pants at the knees as if summoning the courage to speak the truth she'd already decided on. She looked at Nathan for a few seconds before finally speaking. She said there was another man. That, over the last few weeks, she'd been involved with someone she met at the gym. Her words were harsh, slicing through the air between them. Nathan showed no reaction. His eyes were unblinking, yet they didn't shift away. Rachel explained it wasn't love. It was loneliness. A void she tried to fill with quick, fleeting attention. She said she was confused, lost inside herself, and that it just happened. She insisted she wasn't making excuses for her mistake. She admitted she was selfish, immature, and that she'd rather run from her own pain than face it. She said she was telling him now because she wanted a fresh start. She couldn't do that while holding on to this burden. She said she loved him, that his absence felt like a knife twisting inside her, that she wanted to erase everything and do things differently. She promised. She said she'd break it off with the other man. That she wouldn't see him again, would cut him out completely. Nathan listened without interrupting. The coffee in front of him was already cold and untouched. His hands were on the table, steady, but there was a tension in his body that Rachel had never seen before. When she finished, he just stood up. Slowly. He picked up his phone, slipped his wallet back in his pocket, and pushed in his chair without making a sound. He looked at her one last time and said in a firm voice, "Please don't contact me anymore. My lawyer will be in touch." He turned and walked out of the cafe. Rachel stayed behind, tears welling up, her body frozen in place, those words echoing in her head. The door closed behind him. And then there was only silence. 2 months later, Nathan was living in another city. Far from the places where his old memories still stung. He'd asked for a transfer at work, and it was granted easily. He traded his apartment for a smaller house on a quiet street, surrounded by strangers who didn't ask about his past. He started going for morning runs. He discovered a new coffee shop, where the barista remembered his order by the second week. The days still brought memories, but now he could breathe. He no longer had to carry the doubt or try to interpret silences. He was no longer driven by the urge to save what had already broken. He was guided by the desire to rebuild himself. One morning, he was sitting on a park bench, a book open in his lap, a cup of coffee in his hand, watching people come and go. Children were playing, older folks were talking, couples were laughing. There was something peaceful about it all, something he hadn't felt for a long time. He no longer thought of Rachel with anger, but with acceptance. The love he'd given, the devotion he'd shown, the man he'd been, all of it was still part of who he was. But now, there was something more. There was peace. And that peace didn't come from having someone else by his side. It came from finally choosing himself. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.